Many wrestlers and people within the business will talk about how Jake the Snake Roberts had a great mind for the business of professional wrestling, from a creative standpoint, a promo standpoint, to an in-ring psychology standpoint. We have heard time and time again that even when Jake was dealing with serious health issues, he was still sharp as ever when it came to the ins and outs of professional wrestling and storytelling. Another man who knew this very well was Vince McMahon, owner of the WWF. At one point, somewhere around 1991, Jake was under the impression that his knowledge would be put to good use with a writer's job within the World Wrestling Federation, and in 1992, when Pat Patterson was forced out of his creative job due to, let's say, allegations, Jake was also under the impression that his time had come and he would be getting Pat Patterson's job. When things didn't quite work out that way, a series of events unfolded that ultimately led Jake Roberts to WCW. Today's video will look at these events and also dig into Jake's time within World Championship Wrestling. It's important to understand just how big Jake the Snake Roberts was in the WWF before he made the jump to WCW. From 1986 all the way to 1992, Jake had been a key player within the company, whether he was working as a babyface or a heel. His feuds with Rick Rude and Randy Savage stick out the most, but Jake also done great work with the likes of Ted DiBiase, Rick Martel, Ricky Steamboat, and who could forget Andre the Giant. It's shocking to think that Jake Roberts never held a championship during his entire WWF tenure, but at the same time, he didn't really need one. His spot was always secured on the upper mid card, and frequently he would deliver some of the best matches on WWF shows during the late 80s and early 90s. His mic skills were also unique, delivering promos in a cold yet calm manner that made you pay attention to every single word. When all was said and done, Jake Roberts during this era of the WWF became a recognizable name within the company and was also fun to watch in the ring. Jake had his vices, something that has been well documented in the past. Jake was a pro when it came to hiding these vices also, with Vince McMahon saying that you never knew if Jake was under the influence or not. He was such a good con man that no one knew if Jake was mentally all there when he was performing in the ring. But along with this, Vince McMahon also understood that nobody really had a mind for the business quite like Jake Roberts. When it came to wrestling psychology and laying out the blueprints for an angle or storyline, it's been said that Jake was absolutely phenomenal in this area. Vince had praised Jake's creative takes in the past, and Jake firmly believed that his wrestling destiny was with the pencil and paper. He wanted to be part of the WWF creative team. Jake also said that Vince McMahon led him to believe that one day Jake would indeed become part of the WWF writing staff. Charges were brought against Pat Patterson in 1992, which caused Pat to get released from the WWF. Patterson had been working on the creative team since retiring from in-ring competition, and due to allegations brought onto Pat by a former ring announcer, the WWF decided to release him until the court trial had ended. The charges would end up getting dropped, by the way, and Pat was rehired immediately, but still for a brief time there was a spot open on the WWF creative team during Pat's absence. Jake Roberts approached Vince McMahon about getting the job, and Vince said no. Vince told Jake that the position is not being refilled out of respect for Pat, and this piece of news would serve as Jake's tipping point. Around this time, Jake was scheduled to wrestle The Undertaker at WrestleMania 8, and Jake told Vince that he would not perform at Mania if he didn't get his immediate release from the company. Jake felt he was lied to, and if he couldn't get the creative job, then he didn't want to be with the WWF at all. Vince agreed to release Jake Roberts immediately following his match against The Undertaker at WrestleMania 8. Jake said, "I always told Vince that I wanted to write, and I had been promised that job one day by Vince. Pat Patterson was gone, and I went to Vince and said, 'This is the time, I'm ready.' Vince said that out of respect for Pat, they weren't hiring for that position, I was very upset about the whole situation. My father was working for WCW and I was able to also make a deal with them for a very large amount of money. I would be set for life. I went back to Vince and done something I never thought I would do, and that was basically hold somebody up. Not for money, but for a release. I told him at WrestleMania that I either get released or I don't wrestle The Undertaker. And I'm ashamed of that. The bottom line is though, I would have left anyway, but maybe he didn't know that. But I'm ashamed that I played that card. Jake said on the Pick Your Poison WWE DVD that he signed with WCW for a staggering $3.5 million a year. I'm not too sure what to think of that. It seems like a really high number for an upper mid-card talent in 1992, but we will go with what Jake said here. Jake said that he signed this WCW contract under Kip Allen Fry and everything seemed to be fine. Jake had a 90-day no-compete clause in his contract though, and on the 87th day, Kip Allen Fry was replaced by Bill Watts in WCW, a man who Jake had a lot of problems with during his old Mid-South days. Jake said that when he walked into the WCW offices, Bill Watts laughed at him while tearing up his contract, saying the company will never pay him that kind of money. Apparently, Jake went from a promised $3.5 million a year to $200,000 per year. On the 2nd of August 1992, during the WCW Great American Bash Tour, Jake the Snake Roberts showed up in WCW and attacked Sting, the company's #1 babyface at that period of time, delivering 2 DDTs to the Stinger in the process. 8 days later, Jake had his very first WCW televised match against Marcus Bagwell on WCW Saturday Night, a match here that Jake won in around 3 minutes. Before the match, Jake had an interview with Jesse Ventura where Jake would explain his actions. Jake said that he doesn't like how Sting brings hope to young fans, saying that life is all about survival and not about fake hope. At the same tapings, Jake also made quick work of Randy Stallings. After the Stallings match, Jake cut a promo on Sting, telling the Stinger not to play with snakes or he will get bit. During this time too, Jake Roberts would align himself with Cactus Jack, a team that, on paper, sounds extremely good. Jake's next televised WCW matches occurred during WCW Pro tapings on the 16th of August 1992, making quick work of the Italian Stallion and Chad Bird on back-to-back episodes, while the Roberts vs Sting feud would continue via promos. Clash of the Champions 20 took place at Center Stage in Atlanta, Georgia on the 2nd of September 92. This clash show celebrated 20 years of WCW on TBS, and it's definitely worth a watch if you enjoy old school wrestling. The show features stars and personalities of the past, including the likes of Gordon Solie, Bruno Sammartino, and Andre the Giant in his last televised appearance. The show also featured this speech from Ted Turner that gets replayed quite a lot these days on more modern WWE retrospective shows. Anyway, the main event featured an 8-man elimination tag match, pretty much Survivor Series rules here, featuring the team of Rick Rude, Big Van Vader, Super Invader and Jake Roberts taking on the team of Sting, Nikita Koloff and the Steiner brothers. This is one of these Clash main events that doesn't really get mentioned anymore, but it comes recommended. It's pretty fast paced and it's tons of fun also. Anyway, towards the end of the match, it came down to a 3-on-1 situation with Sting having to battle Rude, Vader and Roberts. It was all too much for the Stinger, with Jake Roberts getting the pin on Sting after delivering the DDT. At the very end of this Clash of the Champions broadcast, a mini-movie was played to hype the next WCW pay-per-view, Halloween Havoc. The movie showed a woman going to what looked like an underground bar where she says the magic words "spin the wheel, make the deal" in order to gain entry through the front door. Inside the bar there's a wheel set up. The men inside this establishment start shouting "spin the wheel, make the deal" over and over again as we see Jake Roberts sitting at a table looking very pleased with himself. All of a sudden, Sting is standing at the front door, and then he just walks on in without saying the magic passphrase at the door. So why the woman had to do this isn't explained, but anyway. Sting approaches Jake Roberts, asking him why he was invited to this place. Roberts says at Halloween Havoc, Sting's worst nightmare will come true when 12 of the most brutal match types in wrestling history are placed on a wheel. The Stinger will spin the wheel, and whatever match the pointer stops at, that will be the match that Sting and Jake Roberts will contend in. Jake says he is a master in all of these matches, and Sting will need some luck to defeat him at Halloween Havoc. The two square off with each other as lasers shoot out of their eyes, and the movie comes to an end. This is so bad that it's great. You really need to watch this whole thing in its entirety to appreciate how truly awful it is, with the insanely bad acting throughout and the extras doing their best to ham it up. Just do yourself a favour and watch this vignette. It's available on YouTube right now. So at Halloween Havoc, Sting would have to spin the wheel and make the deal. Whatever match the wheel stopped on, that's what we would see that evening. It's been said that this was not fixed, it wasn't gimmicked, it was totally legit, and neither man knew what kind of match they would be having until the wheel stopped. I'm not so sure. When you hear things in wrestling aren't rigged, especially things like this, then you take it with a pinch of salt. Anyway, let's take a look at what matches were on the wheel. We have a Texas Bull Rope match, Spinner's Choice, a Russian Chain match, a Dog Collar match, an I Quit match, Barbed Wire match, the classic cage match, Lumberjack match with the added bonus of belts, a Prince of Darkness match, better known as a blindfold match, a Texas Death match, a Coal Miner's Glove match, and the First Blood match. Now, looking at these options, I definitely believe the Coal Miner's Glove match would be the weakest. Miner's Glove matches occurred during the early 70s, with the first apparently happening in 1972 in the Cow Palace, and typically the competitors would try to grab a glove suspended on a pole. Once you had the glove in your possession, it usually only took one punch to knock your opponent out. Wrestler Dutch Savage has been credited as the man who came up with the match back in the 70s, but still, even with this knowledge, it was the least attractive match type on offer here. We could only hope that the Stinger would spin the wheel and land on something good. But no, of course not. The wheel stopped at the Coal Miner's Glove match. There were 12 options on the wheel, and we got handed the worst of the lot. Now, people have also commented about how WCW forgot the rules here, and the match should have ended once a competitor got the glove, just like any other pole match, but this was never the case. Even Jesse Ventura explains that the glove can be used after it was retrieved. The match still ends with a pinfall or submission. The match itself wasn't good at all, unfortunately. It should have been way better, seeing we had Sting and Jake Roberts in the ring at the same time. Jake puts this down to Sting phoning in his performance here, saying that Sting had a big money contract and didn't really care about going out and putting on great matches. I disagree with Roberts here. One just has to look at Sting's performances at Wrestle War 1992 and Beach Blast 92 to see that all the blame should not fall on Sting here for the Halloween Havoc 1992 main event. Anyway, Jake Roberts said this about spin the wheel, make the deal. Great thing the commercials were good, because that was it. The match stunk, and so did the idea. That was such a horrible thing to choose. What in the hell, man? I'm not climbing no pole. I thought it was ridiculous, and the match was one of my worst matches. Sting wasn't very excited to wrestle back then, and he had gotten tired of being the guy that everybody depended on to bring in the big house. He was getting lazy because he had that contract, and that is the bad thing about contracts. These guys get lazy and are like, well, I'll get all my money anyway. That is the wrong way to look at it, brother. Those are the guys that hurt wrestling. He went out there and did just enough to get by. Hopefully you too can see the hypocrisy in Jake's statement here. He calls Sting lazy, but also refuses to climb the pole. In saying that, when you look back at the match, the pole was indeed extremely high, probably the longest pole ever used in a wrestling ring, but still, this doesn't take away that the match did not live up to expectations. Sting gets the glove and lays out Roberts, which in turn causes Jake Snake to bite Jake, and Sting gets a pinfall win. All I'll say is, don't watch the match, watch the mini-movie instead. This would also be Jake's final WCW match of this run. So what happened? Why did Jake leave? If you guessed that money was the problem, you'd be right, at least according to Jake. Bill Watts had brought in a new policy in WCW where your wages could get withheld until certain performance standards were met. Basically, you had to work well to earn your full pay. Jake said he didn't like this and he wanted out of his contract. So he took himself to rehab, knowing that Bill Watts would likely fire him. Jake had a plan though. He would then sue WCW for being wrongfully terminated for entering a rehab clinic. This way, Jake would get the rest of his contract paid out without having to work another day for the company. This, by the way, is all according to Jake. Take from that what you will. And this ends our look at Jake Roberts in WCW, as brief as it was. A turbulent time for sure in the career of Jake Roberts, definitely one of the lower points, but still, his Clash 20 tag match was good and worth revisiting. I haven't even begun to scratch the surface on Jake Roberts on this channel. There are more dark times, but there's also some extreme high points to discuss in the future.